What is going on? Welcome back to the Waterboys podcast. We are back in the studio, feeling better than ever. We've got another episode cooked up for you, some more NFL playoffs. Going to talk about some teams that have really pooped the bed. But first, boys, how the heck are you?
Take it away,
I'm
Jackson.
Good. Yeah. I thought about jumping in this time, and I'm like, nah, let Steve have it. But I got the okay, so I'm doing well. I'm on my third week in Charlotte, North Carolina now, traveling with the missus, which is fun.
Out of how many?
That 5. So we're gonna be here for another 2 weeks. It's a great question. Come back on like February 2nd or 3rd or something like that. We definitely miss home. Miss our friends. Miss y'all quite a bit.
I feel like it's flying by. Maybe that's just me.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's funny you say that because this week is anything but. I am bored. I don't even want to touch video games. Like, I'm just sick of them. I tried dusting off the old Call of Duty yesterday. I instantly sick of that again. I was telling Kyle I might read a book today, so that's a huge step. Yeah, I know, right? That's a huge step. So that's where I'm at. Like, not sad, but also like, I feel like I'm turning into a hobbit.
Melancholy.
Yeah, I'm restless.
Get out on the town. Go see the sights.
We have a little bit. It's also freezing right now on the East Coast. I don't know what it's like there, but yesterday it was like 20 degrees, and it's just so it's not fun going outside.
It was very cold yesterday.
So the timing, visiting in January, maybe not quite as ideal. But yeah, and the sun goes down at like 5, so I don't really see the sun much. So
wow, Jackson's depressed. Jackson's depressed. Somebody get him a therapist. Steve, how are you?
I'm okay as I drink my bourbon.
I'm doing great, and I just want to go ahead and plug an opinion I had a few episodes ago when we talked about our least favorite months, and I said January was my least favorite month, and Jackson, you're living in my distaste for this month.
I am living in Steven's hell.
So welcome to that.
Yeah.
I'm doing really well. We had off Monday from work due to Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday, so it's a short week, and we're almost done with the week, so I'm feeling good. Busy weekend with work, but all good stuff.
Steve, I want to just pop on real quick before we get into playoffs and stuff. I know you're feeling extra good. How do you feel after your team put a whooping on the Cowboys?
A whole whooping indeed. I still am really pumped. Kyle, you and I watched it together, so you saw my excitement.
I was right there with you.
But man, I feel like a proud parent seeing this team grow from, I think of our lowest game, probably against the Raiders on Monday Night Football, week 4 or 5, whatever it was. We looked horrible. And now they're putting everything together as a young unit. They're playing together. They have each other's back. It's great. I love it. I love this team. I'm excited for the future. And I would be over the moon to beat the 49ers because we lose to them so many times in the playoffs year after year. So I don't know if this is the year, but man, what a special run it already is and could be.
Quick another thing. How hopeful are you? I mean, obviously you're going to hope for the best here, but let's try to be, how do you actually feel?
My full realistic opinion on it is that I think if we lose, it'll be a close game, but I really think that we can win. Because I think coming into it with a game under our belt already, where the 49ers have had off a week, they might come out a little flat. And if we start the way we started against the Cowboys, we could throw off their whole game plan. So that's where my hope comes from for the Packers. And I would not be shocked if they won. I'll just say that.
Jackson, your thoughts as the football analysis expert.
Analyst, yeah.
Analyst, yeah.
Yeah. The football analysis. I am the analysis. I
That's
love
the word.
watching. I mean, obviously, Packers are historically young. Steven's already talked about that. I think we're all aware of this, of how young they are compared to the other teams in the playoffs, just the NFL in general. One of the youngest, if not the youngest team, Steven. I'm looking to you to correct me on that. But
youngest offense for sure.
Youngest offense. All right. Those kind of teams are really exciting. They're fun to root for, but they also, from a like mentality perspective, there's just not a lot of pressure, and they don't carry the history of the franchise quite in the same way. I think there is something to be said for like the Cowboys team, for instance, where a lot of these players aren't new and they kind of been there, and there's just a little bit more riding on it. There's more expectations, where I feel like as if the Packers were to lose, it's still a successful season, right? Because they've exceeded expectations. Now, I think I do agree with Steven. I think they're going to give the Niners a run for their money. But they're just a very gritty team that's playing really hard. I think Matt LaFleur has them playing a very intense brand of football, which in the playoffs I love to see. It's something that the Eagles lacked this past week against the Buccaneers. They just looked flat. And again, I think it's another example of just a little bit older team, a little more age there, and they're carrying the weight and history of the franchise with them. I don't know if that makes sense, what I'm saying, but yeah, I love watching young offenses and just young teams in general go in and play like they have nothing to lose, almost blissfully ignorant.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of fun to watch.
So, hey, good analysis. So let's get into our first topic of conversation here. Let's flip it. We've got the Cowboys that lost. We've got the Eagles that lost. We've got the Dolphins that lost. Am I missing some? I know. I think
Browns,
I am.
Rams.
Those are the big ones, though. The Eagles and the Cowboys have been, dare I say, a front runner throughout the whole season.
Wow.
Cowboys
is this recording?
I mean, that's just a fact.
Did we get that? Yeah, but that's
just
a
a fact.
fan just said,
"Hey, I'm trying to give an analysis."
Okay. Go.
Quit interrupting my analysis.
Be the analysis. Go ahead.
I mean, they've had great records. They've lost, minimal games. They've been, as best as they probably could be all season long, and then they come lose first round in the playoffs. Just initial thoughts. I mean, yes, I love that they both lost.
Yeah.
I'm rooting for the Cowboys and against the Cowboys and Eagles all day long. Initial thoughts on just those two teams, and in my mind, and maybe the Dolphins if you got thoughts on them. Those are like the three biggest teams that lost. So, what do you guys think?
Well, for the Eagles and Cowboys, I think it's a little bit of the same issue. Towards the end of the season, especially for the Eagles, and then even during the games, it just looked like it was a disjointed team. It didn't look like they were playing for each other, with each other. It didn't look like they were playing for their head coach. It was really hard to tell, what was going on behind closed doors. And I know there's been reports coming out of like AJ Brown and his, disgruntledness towards the team and Sirianni, and like you don't want that going into the playoffs. And then you got guys like CeeDee Lamb when it's 7-0 early in the playoff game against the Packers, sitting on the bench with his head down. And you could tell in the first half he was just checked out. He was dropping balls, he was running routes that, weren't super tight. He just looked off compared to what we've seen. So if you got two stars like that are just off going into a playoffs or to finish a season in AJ Brown's case, you got to figure out what's going on with your locker room, and you got to carry the success of the regular season into the playoffs. And neither team looked like they were ready for the spotlight, which I'll get on. I'll hit on that a little later with a certain person. Okay. But to me, it looked like a disjointed team, both of them.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the Cowboys, it's freaking hilarious. I love it. I am so happy. Like, I'm not on Twitter or like any sort of social media, but I could just see the memes coming out first quarter, second quarter. Like I just love it's happening again. Like, are you kidding me? And it's gotten to a point where ESPN and NFL analysts have jumped on this wagon where they refuse to talk about the Cowboys in the regular season as a Super Bowl contender because they know when it comes playoff time, they're just going to crap the bed. And it's hilarious to watch. I've been watching a lot of those shows this week, just like the analyst just kind of sitting there, just like this smug, I told you so face to all the people that picked the Cowboys to win the Super Bowl. And it's the same old Cowboys. It's just, I don't know what the problem is. Mike McCarthy is, over the past 3 seasons, has gotten them to the second best winning percentage, like just behind the Chiefs, like better than Kyle Shanahan and the Niners. Same amount of Super Bowl wins in that time too as Kyle Shanahan and the Niners, and yet the Cowboys fall under this, I don't know, this stigma that they just can't get it done in the postseason. It's hilarious. Doesn't seem to matter who the coach is, because this isn't the first time this has been a problem. First coach, first quarterback, this isn't new. So I love seeing that. I agree with Steven's point that CeeDee Lamb in particular looked to be not on the same page. Just a weird body language from the team. I really don't think. I mean, obviously, they didn't expect to lose, but if you look at Dak Prescott's post-game interview, he said stunned, he's shocked, like he kept using these words. He was not processing what had just happened. Like he looked dead inside. He was like, I cannot believe I am talking about a loss right now. They didn't give the Packers the respect that they deserved, and the Packers rolled them. They just absolutely killed them at home in a place they're not supposed to lose. I think they got a little ahead of themselves. The Eagles, I don't like AJ Brown. He definitely brought up in an interview a few weeks ago, as Steven also noted, that there's something going on in that locker room. If I remember in his interview, he was talking about how if you're off by like a quarter second, it just messes up the whole play. They have a lot of veterans in there. I don't know why Sirianni or Jason Kelsey or Jalen Hurts or Brandon Graham or Fletcher Cox or whoever you want to point to that are veterans on that team couldn't right the ship. Because they finished the season like 1-5 or 1-6 or something like that. That's just terrible. So they went into the playoffs like a wounded animal. Like I pick the Eagles to win first round, yeah, but like the 9-8 Bucks that were 1-5 against playoff teams down the stretch, like beat them 32-9, I think it was. That's terrible. Like I don't know. Good team because of last year, but it doesn't look any different from the past 7 weeks. Cowboys are just funny because it does look a little different, but also it's the same. Dolphins, kind of moving on to that. I don't know if Tua is ever going to win a Super Bowl. But Steve, what do you think?
Sorry, I'm not ready to move on from the Cowboys yet.
Okay, yeah, let's talk about them. I'd love to talk about
them. The big news coming out of this, besides that they lost, is that they brought back, or they confirmed that they're bringing back McCarthy pretty fast. Yeah. Now, as a Packer fan, I've naturally kind of gravitated to focusing towards Mike McCarthy's career because I saw the highs and the lows with him until he ultimately got fired in 2018 or early 2019, whatever that 18-19 season was. And it looks very similar to what I was able to see towards the latter half of his career with the Packers. Mike McCarthy, there's 2 things I want to say about him. Mm-hmm. First of all, he doesn't excite the players who play for him. Agreed. He is a pretty mellow guy. He doesn't have any, I'll just say swag, even though I don't like saying that. But like Andy Reid has swag. Like people rally behind him because he's a funny guy. Like he surprises people. Mike McCarthy is not cool. Like he's not built for today's game with today's players. If just like a little fun fact, he would, towards the end of his tenure with the Packers, he would skip meetings, like team meetings, and he would have like a masseuse come to his office. Like he was just checked out. He was not a guy that was going to be a good like team chemistry guy. And it seems like that's kind of happening with the Cowboys now. Like like I said, CeeDee Lamb checking out in the middle of a game early on and not wanting to rally behind his coach. That just tells me that, he's not the guy going forward. Second of all, for Mike McCarthy, he's not built for the bright lights. He got the Super Bowl with the Packers early on in his tenure with a great team. And I'm talking like one of the best defenses I've seen from the Packers, if not the best. Certainly the best offensive weapons. And ever since then, he's just kind of been coasting. He's kind of been coasting at like, okay, yeah, that's pretty good, like a solid B plus. But he's never performed in the playoffs since then. He's gotten them to NFC championships, I guess you could say on the coattails of Rodgers, but they've never been able to make the jump. And so when he came into Green Bay and won his Super Bowl with an average regular season team, there wasn't really any expectation for him with a young Rodgers. Then when the expectation grew, he never performed or brought his team to perform the way they should have.
Yeah.
The same thing's happening with the Packers. The Cowboys. They brought him in because they wanted to take that next step. He had the success on paper, but I don't think he's the right guy to take that next step. And it's showing because they're just kind of coasting right now. Pretty good. Like, oh yeah, you'll probably win the division or at least get a wild card, have double-digit wins, but like then what? And you don't want to live at then what? You want to live at, hey, we're a shoo-in for the NFC Championship.
Yeah.
Steve, great analysis. I forgot
That's the name of this
that
episode.
Steve. Great analysis. I'll just make it analysis.
Just analysis.
I forgot that you've had experience with Mr. McCarthy. I don't know much about him. Obviously, you gave some good insight there, but just from watching the game, I know they're down. They look out. They look discombobulated, and to hint, like you see him on the sidelines, and it's just nothing.
Yeah,
it's just like a dark pit, and there's no reaction. There's no emotion. I feel like even Nick Sirianni with the Eagles, they lost, but you're going to get a fire out of him. You're going to get him pumped up. I don't know what it is about him. Like I said, I don't know much about him. I was just watching that game thinking, what is this? Like, what's going on? Like, it just doesn't, something weird. It just doesn't make sense.
That's a great point about Sirianni because he gets criticized for it a lot, but he's consistent with wearing his emotions on his sleeve. And as a player, it might be a little too much sometimes, but more often than not, like I want a coach that's going to go to battle for me. I don't want a coach that's going to sit there with his arms crossed looking at his play sheet after you're down by 30. Like I'm going to want a guy that's going to try to fire me up.
Yeah. That's another thing that I had a problem with Ron Rivera about. Like, sometimes you can get a rise out of him, but for the most part, he just sits there and looks at his play thing and doesn't say much. And that really bothers me. It's just like, why are you even there?
I mean, Bill Belichick does the same thing, though. And
no,
he's a pretty stone cold guy on the sideline. He'll get upset with a bad call, which McCarthy doesn't. Like I'm not disagreeing with either of your points. It's just I think there are some coaches, maybe not Pete Carroll, that are a little bit older, that they aren't Dan Campbell, or honestly Mike McDaniels, even though he's like the smaller, less aggressive guy, or blanking on his name, but the Jets coach who's just a scary person to look at. Yeah, Robert Saleh, thank you. Very, very different coaches. I agree, but
there's a difference though. Like Belichick, we've criticized him a lot the past year, but Belichick, he's a pretty intense guy without saying much. He's got a scowl on his face. He's very blunt.
Has a presence.
Mike McCarthy looks like a deer in the headlights, and he doesn't have that he doesn't.
That's fair.
He doesn't intimidate you. He looks. I don't know.
I don't disagree with what you're saying. Do I think he's going to win a Super Bowl with the Cowboys? No. I don't think it's a him problem, though. Like, I don't think Dak's going to win a Super Bowl. I just don't. Do I think in that situation, and the game that I saw, was it a result of bad coaching? Absolutely. Like, you need to be able to motivate your guys, at least get them turned around at halftime to start doing something, both on offense and defense, and they just had no answers. Like, I know for a fact that the Packers have not been quite that dominant in every game they played, or else they wouldn't have lost the game this year. Like, that was an absolute just spanking of a game. Like, I couldn't believe how one-sided that was. So, coming back to that's tough. But I'm not ready to say that they should move on from Mike McCarthy. I think it's a good decision to bring him back. It's somewhat shocking. Like, I thought he would be fired, but you're really going to tell me if they bring in a different coach and they get 10 wins, like that's now like just the standard he set. Like, they've won 12 regular season games 3 seasons in a row. Like, how do you improve at that point? Like, obviously winning in the postseason, I get it, but I don't know, man. Like, I think that when you get a coach that can have that many wins in the regular season, it's hard to move away. But from that coach, I do agree, though. I mean, his lack of motivation or just energy and emotion just seems weird. I didn't know that about the story at Green Bay, nor any of the other things that come out about him. But
yeah, the Cowboys are a big mystery. It just doesn't make sense.
No,
it doesn't.
And
it's funny
hard,
though. I
it's
enjoy
hilarious.
It.
I would love it if it would just keep on going and going and going.
Yeah.
And never end. But it's just like it's a mystery, and it doesn't make any sense. It's hard to point the finger at one person. And it's hard to figure out why they keep doing this. But again, I don't give a rip. They can keep doing it for the rest of eternity.
Who's gonna be the Commanders coach next year, Kyle? Sorry.
Oh man.
You got
this
Jim
is a tough one.
Harbaugh.
They're
Mike
making some
Vrabel,
big moves
Bill
in the
Belichick.
off season. I mean, in terms of front office. So far they've made some big moves. Getting the guy from the 49ers. It's tough. I read somewhere, and this could have changed, but that Bill Belichick was a front runner. They were talking to him because he grew up in the DC area, whatever.
Yeah.
I don't think I would want that. I'm still not like over Bieniemy being the head coach. Like, I don't know why that's not in more of like a headline thing. I don't know. I honestly do not know.
That's okay. I'm just curious if there was someone that you wanted. Like, obviously predicting it's near impossible, but if there's someone you're like, man, that guy's a free agent. We need to get him. If we don't get him, I'm gonna be frustrated. And it's okay if not, because it's a crazy offseason for coaches. I mean, the talent.
If you would have asked me at the towards the beginning of the season, I would have said we need to hire Bieniemy, and if we don't, we're stupid.
Okay. Which
I'm not sure
decision. I'm with you.
I'm still not sure that that's the move, but also I feel like if they don't hire him, like, somebody else will.
Interesting.
You
think he'll get poached? Go ahead, Steve.
Sorry. I expect with the changes in front office that between the two hires they have, there is an idea of somebody in the NFL that's on nobody's radar that they're going to hire in as a bright mind to come in and completely flip whatever is going on in Washington.
I would love.
I think it's somebody on nobody's radar.
Nothing more than that, to have some nobody come in and freaking rock everybody's world. That would be amazing. And I'm totally down for it. Let's do it.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds great. I'll take that too. I don't know who it is, but I guess that's part of your point, right? Yeah.
Now I could be totally off on this, but when the Dolphins hired what's his face?
Mike McDaniel.
I had never heard of him, but he is super cool, and he's done a pretty good job, if you ask me.
Yeah, he's brilliant.
So to me, that was the type of hire that I feel like they might be looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
which
Sean
would be
McVay,
awesome.
Mike McDaniel, Kyle Shanahan kind of guy.
Yeah, I was actually talking with some other people the other day, and we were
plan.
saying if we could get somebody similar to Sean McVay and Mike McDaniel, that would be younger.
Yeah. Flips the culture on its head. Just
different, yeah.
Which I will say, this is the one point I do agree with about Mike McCarthy. Losing culture is staying, as long as he's there. He might win another Super Bowl in a similar fashion to how we did with the Packers, because the team is just that good, and I do think the Cowboys have a top 5 roster in the NFL. So he's knocking on the door of that. But yeah, I mean, it's just a losing coach in the postseason. I don't know. We need
All right.
to move on from the Cowboys though.
Well, yeah, I was just about to say let's shift this to the other side of it, and we're focusing on the Cowboys and Eagles today because those are big ones.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Those are big ones.
Nick Sirianni, similar situation. What do you do with him going forward? He lost his locker room, it looks like, but at the same time, he hasn't been there that long. He led them to a Super Bowl. He is one of those young, fiery, good culture guys, assuming. But what do you do going forward after this collapse?
Yeah, quick thing. I don't think he's lost his locker room complete. Like a lot of the Eagles players this week are stepping up and defending him, saying it's not totally his fault. I do think it's partially his fault. If anyone watched our last episode, I said, like, what do you do if you go in to Tampa Bay and just get rolled in the first round with Nick Sirianni after finishing 1-5 in the regular season? Like, after losing both of your coordinators, like it's more and more, it's starting to look like their success was not Nick Sirianni. Is the energy very, like, is he a good fit for Philly with his like cockiness and energy and, you know, to your point, the way he motivates? Sure. But I don't know, man. Like, I don't think it's gonna change much. Like we sometimes forget that Jalen Hurts played a year for the Eagles and went like 5-11 and had a very mediocre season before he had this great year. And then he has another year that's like, it wasn't great. Like, he was in the MVP race early on because of who he was and his like contract and who was last year, but he didn't have a good season. It's very interesting how we're considering Jalen Hurts like a elite quarterback, and he's had one good year of 3. Like, he hasn't done much yet. I don't know that you can give all the credit to Nick Sirianni. But they have such a talented roster. Like, and so many veterans on that team. I threw out a few names earlier. I don't know if Jason Kelsey's coming back, but he's like the Peyton Manning of centers. Brandon Graham and Fletcher Cox on defense. I mean, they've both been there for like 11 years plus. Like, it's just they're like staples of the defensive line. And I know they got other guys I'm probably forgetting about, like Lane Johnson, the guard or tackle. So they need to win like yesterday, a Super Bowl. Like, their window is about to close. Especially after you pay Jalen Hurts the $225 million or whatever they paid him. Like, they aren't gonna have enough cap space to go around sooner or later. So I don't have the answers to whether it's Sirianni or not, but like, they need a Super Bowl run this next year or it's going to start falling apart. That's my bold prediction. And teams like Washington are going to start taking over that division. Hopefully.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I was thinking a lot about what you said last episode during the game because you kind of brought up that perfect scenario of like, hey, they're getting steamrolled by the Bucs. And at the time I said you don't move on from Sirianni. And now that I've thought about it a little bit more, I'm going to stick with that. I think you keep Sirianni because 2 reasons. It's early in his coaching career there. He already led you to a Super Bowl. The possibilities are there. I'd give him another year or a partial year if it's bad. That's the first thing. Second thing, who else is out there? You've got a couple guys, but haven't really proved that they can win at a high clip. And so I think you stick
in terms
out
of coaches?
Yeah. You got Belichick and you got Pete Carroll. Belichick is
and Jim Harbaugh and Mike Vrabel.
Jim Harbaugh is going to the Chargers. Vrabel hasn't won at a high clip.
Probably true. Yeah.
He's been in a bad division. No offense.
I think this is the best. No. I agree with you. I don't disagree with that. We're up and coming, okay? But I disagree with the last statement starkly in terms of the coaching talent that's available, but I don't disagree with your point. I don't know if it's time to move on again. I just don't know. He did take you to the Super Bowl last year in the playoffs this year, so like,
that's what I'm saying. It's not like who's available, but who's better. You know.
That's true. This is the same thing I bring up the Cowboys. Like, what's the benchmark for success? So you're firing Nick Sirianni and replacing him. Why? Like, what's the goal of the next guy? Because like, by that standard, he gets to an NFC championship, with most coaches would give their arm for, and they win or lose, and that's a failed season now. Like, it's just, yes, are you not winning? That's true, but it's the steps towards winning that. Yeah, I don't know. It just becomes really hard to fire a coach like that. I think Philly and Dallas are two very tough environments to coach in.
For sure. I
It's
think
hard.
the thing is, McCarthy was brought in to get them over that hump. Sirianni was brought in with no expectations. To get to the Super Bowl with a second-year quarterback, that's great. You were given a team in Dallas that probably best offensive line, one of the best defenses, a pretty good quarterback comparatively to the rest of the league. You just had a really well-rounded team, and you haven't improved. And so that's where my criticism of McCarthy is. You haven't improved. Sirianni went to the Super Bowl with a sophomore quarterback. That doesn't happen all the time. So that's why, even though the success level is the same this year, where they both underperformed and both were disappointing at the end, you got to weigh them differently because one team is at a different level than the other.
Yeah. Two final things I want to say in the Eagles, and I'll be brief. One, I think Jalen Hurts has been injured for like 8 weeks and has been downplaying it. I don't know what he's been dealing with, but I wouldn't be surprised if he has some sort of like surgery in the offseason for something that he just kept saying was minor. So that might have played into it. They didn't have AJ Brown in that playoff game. I don't think everyone realizes that, but that's a huge loss. I mean, I think he broke a record for most consecutive games over 125 receiving yards, like in a row this year. Like he's been sensational. And Darius Slay, one of their veteran corners on the Eagles, said that the switching defensive coordinators midseason was like being in 2 marriages at the same time.
Oh,
like, yeah, that's not great. And the comment, and if you were listening for it, you could hear, I don't know if it's Chris Collinsworth calling the game or who, but they were kind of talking about that during the Bucs game of how like there was just no consistency. I think that manifested itself in the energy and the tackling you saw with the Eagles. Like, they didn't know what their identity was. Like I felt like they were so worried about what their assignment was or what they were supposed to be doing or what kind of leverage, like not just where they're supposed to be on the field, but what kind of leverage they're taking. Like how are we playing this team such that like tackling wasn't even, and just being aggressive and just focusing on hitting the guy like that wasn't second nature. Right. Which supports your point that maybe Sirianni isn't the problem. But I mean, like, again, their window's closing. But I'd like to talk about like the Dolphins, because like the Dolphins, I mean, Kyle brought up Mike McDaniels is a great. Give me 1 second.
Okay. Well, real quick with the Dolphins, I don't think they should change anything, honestly. I think they are at a point where they have young talent. They're still kind of forming who they are. They haven't been good for a while. So I think the Dolphins are fine where they are. Just you can't keep making the same mistakes of, the mistakes that you did make this year. And I think a lot of them were big and turning over the ball, protecting the quarterback, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't change anything with the Dolphins, just improve.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry I had to run out for a second, but I think what I was going to say is Kyle brought up that Mike McDaniels is a brilliant coach. I just like the Miami football team going into like negative 20-degree weather, granted one of the coldest, fourth coldest playoff game ever or something like that. I just don't see them making an AFC run against teams like the Bills, the Bengals, the Chiefs. They'd probably be fine against Jacksonville. I'm very pessimistic against my own team, but just any of these cold weather AFC teams, they just don't play well against good teams in general, much less like going on the road the whole time. Like that's just not typically where they're strong. So I think they might get one Super Bowl in Mike McDaniel's tenure, and it's like that really good season where they get home field advantage. But I don't think you need to move on from Tua. I'm with you. I don't think you need to make any major changes, but they haven't made that jump into elite yet. And given the pieces they have, I think it's worth reevaluating who you're sending out on that field. Because I mean, Mostert led in rushing yards, Tua led in passing yards, Tyreek led in receiving yards, and they were a pretty easy, like, first round out team. So I just like, what else do you need at that point? Like they scored 7 points, and it's supposed to be the best offense, but yeah.
Yep.
It's interesting.
I mean, there's a lot of evaluating that's going to go on for these teams that lost and teams that will lose this week. But hey,
Yeah.
I mean, and this isn't just because the Packers are in. These playoffs are very entertaining going forward. I mean,
Yeah,
if
they
you
have
look at
been.
the AFC side, it's just stacked with great games. We've already had great games on both sides. And if you want to think about
Yeah.
something, Baker Mayfield, Jordan Love, Brock Purdy, or Jared Goff will start in the Super Bowl. And that's crazy to me. If you would have told me that 5 years ago, I'd have been like, what? No way. But here we are.
Yeah. Crazy playoffs. I'm actually enjoying the playoffs for once, even though the Commanders aren't in it. I feel like I haven't really enjoyed it other than like watching the Super Bowl, but I'm having a good time. I was rooting for the Packers with Steve getting rowdy.
Thank you.
It was a good time. Yeah, I'm excited. Excited to see what happens. I feel like there's already
Yeah.
been some crazy, as we've already hit on. There's already been some crazy outcomes. So looking forward
Crazy
to what
games.
happens next. Yeah.
On that note, actually, because we talked about the playoff bracket last week, worth revisiting the results of round one. So, admittedly, I was deceived. I blame Bleacher Report and CBS Sports for how they set up their online brackets. But I forgot that NFL does dynamic seeding, so the low seed plays the high seed. It's not necessarily like March Madness where you just go down the line. So Kyle went 5 for 6 in round one and picking the games correctly. Correctly picked the Texans, Chiefs, Bills, Packers, and Lions. The only game he missed one was the Eagles, which is a fair miss.
And I believe
strong first round.
when I was picking, I said I wish I could choose the Bucks, but I just don't think I can.
Yeah, I believe you're correct, Steven.
Well done.
In seconds, I want to say close second, but Kyle really did kind of run away with first round. He picked Chiefs, Bills, and Packers, so went 50%. Incorrectly picked Rams and Browns. I was right there with you, though, only getting 2 games correct. And that was just the Chiefs and Bills, and those were probably the easiest ones to pick. So I really missed on most of these games. So that's a bummer. I'm going to have some ground to make up here. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it. Luckily, we give more points per round, but I really can only pick correctly in like one corner. So unless the Ravens and 49ers won a few games because they were not included in the first round. But yeah.
Not a lot of room for error.
I can't wait to see not the Eagles, sorry, the Lions Buccaneers game. Does Jared Goff and Baker Mayfield, like, what world are we in? I just
I know.
That's what I'm saying.
it's crazy. And then to your point, Steven, I actually, it didn't hit me. Like, I had to go back and look at the playoff bracket when you just said what you said. The fact that Jordan Love, Brock Purdy, Baker Mayfield, or Jared Goff will be playing the Super Bowl, that is bizarre. I love it.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it. It's incredible.
AFC side has
I'm
the
excited.
stars. We'll just say that.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, they do. You got Lamar Jackson, CJ Stroud, Josh Allen, and Patrick Mahomes at quarterback over there. That's a juggernaut of a lineup.
A little more believable.
Yeah, that one makes more sense.
Yeah. Anyway, but yeah, we'll be watching. I'm pumped. Let's keep a miracle run going for the Pack. I hope next week we're talking about it and celebrating the Packers win. But I'm satisfied. I'm satisfied with their season. But let's go get some more wins. All right, Kyle. Nothing.
Sorry.
I mean, come on. We're daydreaming.
I thought somebody else was gonna say something. Yeah. Okay. Playoffs good. Steve, rumor has it you've got a quick draw for us. Jackson, I know you've got to go, so salute to you, good sir. Thanks for joining us on the episode.
Answer for what you think I would say for the quick draw.
I think I have an idea.
Okay, perfect.
I'll speak on your behalf.
Yes.
Great.
Jackson, you'll have to tune in to find out what happens.
Kyle, I do not give you permission to speak on behalf. Only Stephen.
Hey, come on,
Let's
man.
make that abundantly clear.
Come on.
All right.
All right. See you later, Jackson. Thanks for tuning in. Not you tuning in. Never mind. Okay. You know what time it is. It's time for everybody's favorite quick draw. Ba-ding, ding, ding. Steve, what do you got for us?
Kyle, we're finishing this one out old school, just you and me.
Just like the old days.
And we're reaching back into the old days. Thank you for that, because NCAA 2024 was announced to release in July, whether it's true or not, but it inspired this week's quick draw because I am kicking it back to our childhood, and we're going to revisit our favorite video games, or our favorite video game. We'll keep it at one to keep it quick. Favorite video game as a child, and I've actually got Jackson's answer, and I don't know if it's true or not, but
child or just like anytime in the childhood.
We'll say age range 8 to 14. Our prime.
All right, 8 to 14. That was probably when I got my first Xbox, the OG Xbox. That was close. That was probably, oh gosh, how many years? I'm 26, 8 to 14. It's over 10 years. So, yeah, that was probably the OG Xbox. And back then, my favorite game on the OG Xbox was Need for Speed Most Wanted.
Wow. Good game. I had it on my PS2, I believe. Really fun. Really fun. Yeah. That's Jackson might actually have a Need for Speed game. I know he plays those a lot. I was going to say for Jackson, he seems like an NFL street guy. I know he's mentioned it before, but I can see him as an NFL street guy. So that was Jackson's favorite video game. We're going to go with that. Myself, I logged a lot of hours on Star Wars Battlefront 2. I loved that game. Big Star Wars fan growing up, and that was a game that never got old, in my opinion. And then you got the classics like the NCAA footballs, the basketballs. The Madden 09 was one that I played a lot. So to have NCAA football come back, I hope it's a good game. If it ever comes. But
I have pretty high hopes. To be honest, I know that everyone was waiting for the trailer, the college football playoff championship. It never came, which was a huge bummer. I was waiting, and it never showed up. So I'm not sure where that leak or rumor came from, but it was just straight up wrong. But I mean, I really do hope it does come, because back, a little bit later on in my days, that was NCAA 14 was one of my favorite games of all time. The Road to Glory. You start out in high school, you get the college offers. It was just an awesome, awesome game.
Yeah.
And back, I mean, you might be able to do this now, but back then you could transfer your player from the NCAA game to the NFL game. So you could like get drafted and all that stuff. So it was like a full circle experience. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm hoping it comes out.
Yeah, I'm pumped. Games, I don't know. They don't hit like they used to. Guess we're getting old.
They don't. I think a lot of times people are like, oh, the good old days when we were playing. I think it was more like you were just a kid and you had no responsibilities, and like that's what you did. So like it's more of like I miss childhood than I do like the actual game itself, because I mean, we'll go back and play Fortnite, and back when we were in college and had nothing else to do, we were freaking living the life. And now I go back and I'm like, it just doesn't quite hit the same.
Yeah.
I think that's just, we're old. But, I can still imagine the glory days.
Amen.
Imagine the glory days.
Yeah. I love it. Anyway.
Yep.
So that's quick draw.
Quick
Everyone's
draw.
favorite.
Ba-ding. Ding-da-ding. That's going to wrap up this episode. We appreciate you tuning in. Follow us on social media, waterboys.podcast. Check us out, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, maybe YouTube one day. Who knows? Check us out. Share with your friends. Leave us a review. We love all feedback. Let us know what you think. We appreciate you tuning in, and we'll see you next time.